Hello, and welcome to Daniel Crossley's evaluation of the podcasts. Today we'll be talking about the strengths, weaknesses, and areas of improvement, as well as comments from my peers. Chris is here today, and he has listened to the podcast.
I have.
And he will be sharing his thoughts and feelings. Now, I will now say my strengths. I believe that I was an enthusiastic host throughout the entire course of the podcast. That was in general playing the games and, speaking to the people who I was interviewing, and as well as to my co-host, which was Ryan. And another strength was that my knowledge of logic going through onto the podcast. So the automation on each track, so it slowly came up in volume. So it was a nice transition from speech to track. Did that as well by bringing down the track as well, so then it flowed into our speech. Also use of plugins like delay on the audio sting, which makes it more memorable. And it, when people do hear that audio sting, they would know that it is the individual podcast, as on the actual sting it is said in the individual podcast, but in sort of a very elongated sort of manner. So it's just quite epic and it's memorable. I had a structured podcast, so we went through the audio stings, the introductions, said what's going to be happening on the show, then a track, then an interview, a short interview, and then an interview with Jules, and then a short clip from Larry, and then interviewing Larry, and then we go into an advert break, and then we talk about the world today, which is sort of different topics. Like each week could be focused on different things, and this week it happened to be fidget spinners and what people thought about them. I also had, and then my fifth strength, I was able to cover different topics. So within the podcast, we cover different topics within the interview, and we sort of managed to branch off different things. And it really helped when we were improvising this, as if it was structured, then it will be a lot. If the speech was structured and I told them what to say, then it wouldn't be a very well done sort of interview. And that it went off into different areas. Like we managed to get onto the topic of fidget spinners very gradually, and we managed to talk about the production of tracks and stuff, and where each question led into the next. So it was quite nice. Weaknesses. A few of stops I had in the podcast. Now this sort of created a void, and people would if they were listening, they would think if the podcast actually stopped, and it sort of stopped the flow. A way that I could improve this is it's just to have a script either next to me or near me, so I can look at it constantly and say, right, I need to talk about this. I did have a small script stating what I was going to do next after next, but it wasn't very detailed, so I was sort of running thoughts in my head. I was also stuttering and murmuring, and this isn't make for the best podcast host, because if you're stuttering and murmuring, it adds to the stop in speech. It just doesn't make it very professional, and people are wondering, oh, is this guy, I can't actually get a word in edgeways from this guy, and they don't relate, and if they don't relate, then the podcast won't sell at all. A way that I can prove this is just having a script next to me, but going through it by myself before recording the podcast, and just knowing what I'm going to say exactly. Another weakness was that a few different takes were taken on the recording of the voice. Normally on an actual maybe live podcast or just a normal podcast, they wouldn't necessarily have a lot of takes. I think this took a lot of good material away that we sort of ruined by either swearing or making comments that weren't in the podcast, or me stopping for a long amount of time not knowing what I was going to do. Another way that I can improve on this is, once again, having a script, knowing what I'm going to say, having the people who I'm interviewing and the guests on the show, having them up to date on what's actually going down, and I need to tell them what can be said and what can't be said. So that needs to be issued to the people in the studio. A weakness is that I was also rushing a lot of the takes because I always had in my head, that there was 20 minutes that I had to do, and certain sections I didn't spend as much time as I wanted to, just because I had that in my head. But to improve next time, I'll think about each of the topics and the sections, and obviously know exactly what I'm going to say there as well. Another weakness was like my equipment that I used. So I used the SM57 for the mics, and they weren't the best mics to use, as there was a lot of popping, and and sometimes you just couldn't hear some people. That general equipment. A way to improve this is that I can get this equipment ready before the podcast, before my time is allocated in the studio. Just get that ready, so I know everything's there, 58s, and it's all done. So I wouldn't have to go, back and forth, trying to find it. I did try to find them, but I wasn't successful. An improvement would just be to try and find all that equipment beforehand. And then I have Chris here with me.
What's up?
So what did you think of the podcast? What do you think was good? What do you think was bad?
I think I thought the content was good.
Content was good.
It was a well-structured podcast.
Mm-hmm.
It was definitely interesting, which definitely helps. It wasn't a boring podcast.
It was boring.
It was a topic of good interest. I think the quiz definitely was a top point. That was quite interesting. Humorous as well.
Definitely.
Which definitely that's gonna help with it's a good selling point for the podcast.
Any weaknesses at all? Things that could be improved? Maybe small areas.
I would just say that, the general flow of it was a bit stuttery.
Yeah.
I think, it kind of felt everything was a bit sort of forced, and no one really knew the direction. I think before you recorded it, if you'd have given, all your guest speakers a bit of a direction as to where we were going, more, rather than sort of a brief description and then throwing everyone in, because that's kind of what it sounded like. Okay. I mean, it was good, but it did sound a little bit like no one really knew what to do.
Fantastic.
At times. Other than that,
so
pretty solid.
So from what from what Chris said here, I know that the main improvement was just to have everything a lot more structured, and to have a little bit more direction. Same sort of thing that I said, for the improvements on the weaknesses about having everything structured and stuff. But that just shows how much it is an important factor to make a good, interesting and interactive and sort of compelling, podcast. Yeah, I think that's it.
I think so.
Thank you very much.